Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Adam from Impulsive Gamer, and today, we're back in FGO with another off-meta build guide, the series where we show that every servant's awesome and tier lists don't matter. Remember, all of my off-meta builds are just proof of concept, so you can take what I show you and run in any direction that you want. Today, in honor of the Fate Zero event, we're going to look at a party that'll outlast even the toughest demon pillar. I personally used this party during the Seraph event to outlast Kiara for 49 turns. Now, if you'd rather deal damage than take it, check out the linked video for another off-meta build where we'll look at a damage-based caster party. Now, before we get into the video, it would really help me grow my channel if you could leave a like so that YouTube knows to show my guides to other people who need them. Now, without further ado, let's get on to the guide. Now, I like to call this my Immortality party. It's based on both healing and invincibility. We're going to try and prevent as much damage as we can and heal whatever we do take. We're going to run 2 servants for each role, as well as Mash for her good utility. We're going to start by having a healer and an invincible granter in the front, and another one of each plus Mash in the back. Because of the Mystic Code that we're going to choose to run, our backline servants are even more important than in any other build, so they're not to be neglected. For our first healer, we're going to use one of the best dedicated healers in the game, Medea Lily. Medea Lily uses Painbreaker for her Noble Phantasm. It's a great catch-all for healing. Whatever you need, it can do. When you activate it, it both removes all debuffs from all allies, as well as applying a big heal. We'll be able to make great use of this through Medea Lily's amazing Noble Phantasm uptime. She has 3 arts cards, and when we combine this with all of our other art-centric servants, we'll be making arts chains almost constantly. And for that emergency situation, Medea Lily's first ability is Rapid Words of the Divine. This ability will greatly restore her Noble Phantasm charge, and I really mean greatly. If you put her in the backline with a craft essence that increases her starting Noble Phantasm charge, Rapid Words of the Divine will let her come in and use Painbreaker immediately. Combine her Noble Phantasm with her third ability, Ephemeral Love, which will increase HP recovery for one ally to really save a servant in need. Her second ability is fairly bad before the rank up, but once you've done it, it can be pretty useful. It'll remove poison from all allies, which is fairly situational, but it will also heal all allies as well. I said that this build was in honor of Fate Zero, and I meant it. Our second healer is going to be Irisviel. Irisviel is a very good dedicated healer, on par with Medea Lily. Her Noble Phantasm, Song of Grail, is a lot like Medea's Painbreaker. It applies a large heal, though not as large as Medea's, to all allies. It makes up for the lower healing potential by giving all of your servants 3 turns of guts. We hope we're not going to need it, but it's good to have just in case. Her abilities lean a little more towards single target healing than Medea's. Her first ability, Sacrificial Resolve, increases her healing effectiveness while used. This can be used with her Noble Phantasm, or her third ability, Magical Healing, a single target heal. Her Noble Phantasm uptime skill is Child of Nature. Child of Nature increases her Noble Phantasm gain for 3 turns, but more importantly, it'll also give her a turn of Invincible. You might be wondering why I haven't talked about craft essences yet. For your healers, we're going to want to tailor our craft essences to where they are in the party instead of who they are. For this reason, I'm going to talk about them both right now. Because the frontline healer will have time to act before needing to heal, we're going to want to use a craft essence to either enhance their healing ability or their Noble Phantasm gain. For healing effectiveness, we're going to use the 4-star craft essence Gentle Affection. Gentle Affection increases the equipped servant's healing effectiveness by 15%. Because the first healer has time to gain Noble Phantasm charge on their own, it can be helpful to boost their healing instead of their Noble Phantasm charge. But if you're not confident, you can always use Magical Girl of Sapphire, or for a more budget option, Divine Banquet, to increase their Noble Phantasm gain. We want our backline healer to be able to swap into the party ready to go, so we're going to give them a strong starting Noble Phantasm charge. Kaleidoscope is probably the best option here, but the imaginary element will certainly work on a budget. It really doesn't matter which servant you put in the front and which one you put in the back, but because Medea comes with Rapid Words of the Divine, she can be a good choice for the backline, as she can come in and use her Noble Phantasm in the same turn. On to the second set of servants we're using for this build, the Invincibility Granters. Surprising no one, we're going to start out using Joan of Arc. After her second interlude, her Noble Phantasm becomes one of the most useful in the game. Her Noble Phantasm, Luminosity Eternal, is an amazing defensive Noble Phantasm, and her 3 arts cards really help to give it some good uptime. Her Noble Phantasm gives the whole party invincible for a full turn, increased defense for 3 turns, increased healing for 2 turns, and removes all party debuffs when cast. And that's a lot of utility for just one Noble Phantasm. Now before her second interlude, her Noble Phantasm will also leave her stunned for a turn. She's still fine, but she's a lot more useful afterwards once you've gotten rid of it. Now, of her 3 abilities, we're only really concerned with her third one, Divine Judgment. Divine Judgment gives you a high chance to stun an enemy servant. This can be useful because what we're worried about are enemy Noble Phantasms going off when we're not ready for it. This will give you an extra turn if you need to charge up your Noble Phantasm or swap in a different servant. For her Craft Essence, we're really going to focus on getting that Noble Phantasm as consistently as possible. So we're either going to want to use Prisma Cosmos or Magical Girl of Sapphire. If you're on a budget, you can use the Imaginary Element to get yourself started, or you can use Divine Banquet as the budget version of Magical Girl of Sapphire. Really, either option will do fine. Our second invincibility granter is going to be Merlin. Merlin works for us as both a healer and a party invincibility giver. His Noble Phantasm, Garden of Avalon, is a 5-turn party heal and a 5-turn Noble Phantasm gain. With this build, you're going to have no problem keeping those buffs up consistently. His ability pool is a nice smattering of different abilities, 2 of the 3 of which are going to be super good here. Because this party lacks damage, Dreamlike Charisma is a good way to get a small damage bump when you need it. It also charges the party's Noble Phantasm, always a plus. But the real reason he's here is for Illusion. It gives invincibility to all allies for a turn, while decreasing the critical effectiveness of our enemies for 3 turns. An emergency invincibility that we can apply at the push of a button is incredibly helpful, and it can really save the day at the end of a long boss fight. His last ability, Hero Creation, is really meant for buster parties, so its power is significantly decreased if your support servant isn't buster based. Prisma Cosmos is going to be the best CE for Merlin. Although he's in the party because of his skills, we do want to take full advantage of his Noble Phantasm, and we're going to try and give it uptime as close to every 5 turns as possible. Again, our budget option is either going to be the Imaginary Element or Divine Banquet. Now, in most builds, we just run Mash because she's free and we can. In this build, however, Mash is a very important part. It'll still work fine without her, but it wouldn't be nearly as good. This build does highly benefit from her pre-Lost Belt abilities, so do keep that in mind. Mash is a heavily defensive servant. Her Noble Phantasm, Lord Camelot, gives a gigantic defense boost and a damage cut to all allies. It's no Luminosity Eternal, but it's always safer to have more of a good thing. What we really care about, though, are her abilities. Honorable Wall of Snowflakes is one of the best defense/damage cuts in the game. We'll really want to keep it up as often as possible. Obscurant Wall of Chalk can apply Invincible to one ally, so use it to save someone at low health so they can be healed later. Shield of Rousing Resolution can force your enemies to attack someone with invincibility or someone that you think can take the hit. If you've used the servants and craft essences that I've recommended so far, you'll still have enough cost left to put a 4-star craft essence on Mash. I'd recommend Divine Banquet to help with her Noble Phantasm uptime. For our support servant, we're going to want to bring in a damage dealer, so you can tailor this spot to the enemy types. Pick the highest possible damage servant that you can. I would generally suggest Jolter, but if you want to tailor it even more, you could go with Arturia, Gilgamesh, Ozymandias, or Scathach for their raw damage potential. Because of how defensive this build is, our choice of Mystic Code is very important. The Chaldea combat uniform provides us with the utility that we need for many situations. Grandeur will stun any enemy with a 100% chance. This is a great way to delay an enemy Noble Phantasm if you aren't ready for it. Order Change is even more important. It allows us to make full use of our backline servants. We can pull in our second healer if we need an immediate heal, Merlin for an immediate party invincible, or Mash to wall a noble phantasm for us. There's just so much utility here that I really wouldn't suggest any other Mystic codes for this build. This build is obviously defensive to the extreme, but as always, the builds I show off are more proof of concept. You can always take what you've learned here to make your own teams, something a little more balanced perhaps. You could consider not running the backline healers in order to make room for more damage, or maybe you'd rather only run your healers in the backline for emergencies. It's completely up to you how and who you want to play. If there's a servant or a build that you want to see, tell me down below. I'll try my best to make it into a video. Till next time, I've been Adam, you've been awesome.